Welcome. Today I am talking to Jay Britton, who is taking the Tudor world by storm with her beautiful performances of Tudor songs. Jay, who is a classically trained soprano, is becoming well known in Tudor circles as the Tudor Songbook. She performs on a regular basis at historic houses across the country. I heard Jay sing online via her Instagram page, but recently had the absolute pleasure of hearing Jay for real in the inner courtyard of Hever Castle, where she kindly performed for my tour group during our stay for the Anne Boleyn tour. Now, not only does Jay sound amazing, but she looks the part too, always performing in full Tudor costume and accompanied by period instruments. So we're going to be talking to Jay today, and members of my British History Patreon club have submitted their own questions for Jay, which we will put to her at the end of the main interview. And if you would like the chance to see the full extended interview and have the opportunity to put your questions forward to future guests, then please visit www.patreon.com/British History to join. First of all, I want to welcome Jay. So a big thank you for speaking to us today.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm looking forward to it.
Now, I grew up around music. I learned the clarinet and saxophone from an early age. I have a very musical father. I love singing. So when the opportunity came up to speak to you about music and about your performances, I grabbed it. So I did get to hear you because you surprised us by singing for us at Hever, which was amazing. Oh my God.
Really special for me to be there that day at Hever. So singing as Anne Boleyn on the day that she was silenced is just... And so many people come that day. I mean, it wasn't a weekend. So people that have come that day have come because they know.
So when did you start singing?
I started singing when I was about 11. So in my last year of primary school, I think year 6 we call that. There was some auditions. I say auditions quite loosely for that. They just listened to everyone sing to cast us in the school play, and I got given the main part. And apparently they told my mum, and my mum was like, "Are you sure? Really? You can sing?" And we'd been a family that would sing in the car together. We'd all sing all the time at home, but no one was a professional musician. No one was a singer. It was just all something that we all did for fun. But I think because of that, I had the confidence with it, so I could properly sing out for it. And it was from there that I thought, oh, I really enjoy this. And I still remember now the feeling of excitement coming off of stage after doing that first little, it was like the Wind in the Willows that we were doing, a kind of musical version of that, and I was playing the mole and I had like little black nose and whiskers drawn on, and I remember the sheer excitement of performing in front of people, and I thought, I love that. And from there I started having singing lessons all the way through secondary school, and just decided that that's what I wanted to do.
That's wonderful. Do you know, I did Wind in the Willows at secondary school.
Did you?
Yes, and I had to play the clarinet. I was in the band. Didn't get to sing. The only time I sang in a school production, because I was always in the band, was we did Grease in my final year, and I was like, no way am I going in the band. I have to go for a part, and I did, and I got a part.
Excellent.
That was it. So I remember Wind in the Willows. I don't remember. I bet you if I heard the songs now, I'd remember them. So, and obviously you're the Tudor Songbook, but so are you generally interested in Tudor history? And when did that start?
I've been interested in Tudor history since I was a child as well. I grew up in South East London. In fact, I grew up in Eltham. At the Nursery Palace. We've got Eltham Palace on our doorstep. We're half an hour on the train away from the Tower of London. We're about an hour away in the car from Hampton Court Palace. Hever Castle is about a 20-minute drive from where I live now as well. I still live in the area. I'm not in Eltham anymore, but I'm close by. And it was just something that we were surrounded with all the time. And it's fascinating when you're a little kid learning about like this kind of, and you get taught of him as the tyrant king, and he chopped his wife's heads off, and then you hear about Bloody Mary and Elizabeth I, this incredible dynasty. It is really, really captivating for a child. And when I studied I studied music at university for my undergraduate and for my master's, but I've always kept up reading about history and watching documentaries about history, and I enjoy the dramas as well. I love the Tudors and the Spanish Princess and programs like that, but you know, I do take them as fiction. But just everything, I've always wanted to surround myself with the history of the Tudor period. I just find it endlessly interesting.
Where you grew up as well, then, that is, I mean, you're right there.
Yeah, we are. We're it's on our doorstep.
I still wonder if Henry would have been famous if he hadn't have had 6 wives. So I think it is down to the women that he is known to history at all.
Absolutely. And when, I mean, you can just see that Anne Boleyn is a queen consort, but all over the world she is staggeringly famous.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
To be that famous now, 500 years after you've died.
Yeah. I think that is incredible. She, you know, she wasn't a monarch. She was famous for being quite an infamous wife of the king. But yeah, I think the whole having 6 wives is quite extreme, and it is those extremes that people look for interesting stories. And really, you couldn't write a better drama if you wanted to than that, could you? I mean, that it's unbelievable, but it's true.
Yeah, helps you remember as well, isn't it? It's almost like a shortcut. The 6 wives one.
Yeah, the 6 wives one, and it's also really interesting having, when you get learned about it, when you get taught about it at school. Obviously, they've got a really short space of time to get through a huge amount of history, so you are really taught the kind of basics, and some of it's not quite how we would then understand it when you read further into Tudor history. So you do just think, oh, divorce beheaded died, divorce beheaded survived. You know, lucky Catherine Parr. That's what I remember thinking as I grew up, and it's only as I read about her, as later on in my kind of my 20s, that I thought, wow, she wasn't the lucky one at all.
No, probably Anna Cleves was the lucky, if you want to say it, one. But then she had to live her life on her own as a, you know, she wasn't allowed. She didn't get married again. So when did you start the Tudor Songbook? Because you've come into sort of my vision, I don't know what's the word, in the last maybe year, maybe a bit more. So when did you start?
I started it in September last year, so we're not even a year yet.
It hasn't been a year yet.
It's not been a year yet. I think probably around next month is when I commissioned my first gown to be made, because I had the idea in my head. I thought, actually, I can combine these 2 things that I've loved my entire life. And I can't believe that it took me to the age of 36, like I was last year, to click that I could do singing and history together. It just, even now I can't believe it took me that long to combine those 2 things, because it's an absolute dream doing it. I love it.
Sometimes these things just, they're so obvious after the fact.
After the click, my mum was even like, I can't believe that we haven't thought of you doing this before.
Yeah, well, maybe because the time is right.
I think the time right now. Yeah, the time is right now. The kids are at school, so I've actually got time to do stuff now. Yes,
well, that's a biggie. So you're performing quite often, I think, from what I can tell from looking at your Instagram. And what's your catalogue of music like, and how do you find Tudor songs and music to perform? Where'd you go?
There's quite a lot of resources available out there when you know where to look. So quite famously, in the Elizabethan period, you've got John Dowland, who has written dozens and dozens and dozens of songs for voice and lute. Absolutely incredible. And then you've got there are contemporary resources as well. There are songbooks like the Anne Boleyn songbook that I saw quite recently.
I'm going to ask you about that later. Yeah,
I know. I have a feeling we might have a little chat about that. The Catherine of Aragon and Henry VIII songbook, the Royal Choir book, I think it's called. I've got it around me somewhere. And they're all the original manuscripts for the music. Some of them have been put into modern notation, others haven't been. So there is a little bit of kind of working out to do for some of them. But once you know the names of the composers, you can then go and you can look at what other music they've done. So there might be something that's in the Royal Choir book by a composer and you think, I like that, and then you can go off and you can look up that composer. And it's like, you know, when you kind of break the ice a little bit, and then the more you look, the more you find it's a treasure trove of stuff out there.
That's nice to know that there's something that's so much to look at from that period, because I mean, this is the soundtrack. This is like the now 15 whatever.
Now 1529 or whatever we are. Yeah. Actually, the Anne Boleyn Songbook could be now 1529. But yeah, that's exactly it, and that's why I wanted to bring the Tudor Songbook into existence as well, because immersive history is something that I really love. I love Hampton Court, and when they play the noises of the horses' hooves, and you go into the kitchens and you can smell them cooking food, and you can see and you can touch the ingredients, and that kind of thing really puts you back. You feel like you're walking in their shoes, and I think that's what all of us do when we go to a historic property. We want to be trying to experience life as it would have been for them in that time, in whatever house you're going to for that period. And to me, the music is such a huge resource in that, because it really was a reflection of what was going on socially, politically, religious at the time. It encapsulates all of that. It really is the mood of the elite at the time.
And how do you mentioned then about some have been translated into modern notation. So for the ones that haven't, well, I suppose even for the ones that have, how do you know that you're creating the same sound as they would have done at the time?
There's certain things that we can reference. So there's a book about, I think it's called the Notation of Polyphonic Music from 900 to 1600 by Appel. And that really goes into detail, deciphering down what each individual symbol means. And you can trace it back as far as the Gregorian chant, so the chant that the monks were singing, and you can watch the evolution of the written notation. So when you start it right back at the beginning, it's like building up layers of detail, rather than if you just look at it straight away and you think, there's a lot going on here. If you're looking at one detail at a time and then just layering up how the notation has evolved through time, it makes it a little bit easier. But luckily, because I wouldn't dare to call myself a music historian, luckily there are some really clever people out there who have done a lot of this for us and have made these really, really fantastic editions of early music that people like me can perform.
There are some very clever people out there.
They really, really are. They really are.
I'm in awe of it. I mean, because I think it's like I said when we were chatting a bit earlier about, I'm really glad that I learnt to read music when I was a child. Can you imagine looking at a manuscript as an adult and having to try and start deciphering that?
It's no idea. Yeah.
Whereas as a child, you sort of but then. So for me, looking at a medieval type notation, I'm like, is that what I think it is? It's probably not. I have no idea where to start.
There are certain things that are different, but there are things that are the same. And I think when you already have the basics in reading what we would have now as modern notation, all you need is a kind of key almost to look at. Those notes. A dot means double rather than adding on half the time again. The clef can move around a lot. So rather than we generally use the treble clef and the bass clef now if we're writing for choir music, but they would have each part had a different clef.
Right.
Rather than being written with the 4 lines that would all go along at the same time, these would have the alto part written in full, and then next to it would have the tenor part written in full. So the book would be placed down flat and each person was reading from their line rather than scanning along the entire parts like we would do today.
That would help with the amount of page turning required.
I think so.
You're all reading off the same, because of course I suppose they're going to be reading off the same, because you're not going to, at that point when parchment or whatever they're using is so expensive, you're not going to have, here's the alto part, here's the bass part.
And it also it depends on who the book's for as well, because I'm thinking of the Anne Boleyn manuscript, that wasn't something that was going to be distributed to loads of different choir members. That was just her book. So then she's got those there. And this is what I love about that book, because you can just imagine them putting it on the table. Who's singing the other parts? Did Henry VIII sing? We know he did sing. We know he was a gifted musician. So it's not, I don't think it's impossible to think that maybe they sang bits together. I just, in my heart, I really want that to be true.
That's a very nice idea.
It's not beyond the realms of possibility, I don't think.
So we're going to go, definitely. I want to ask you, I've got one more question I'd like to ask you, and then we'll delve into the Anne Boleyn book, because I didn't know it existed. So I'm desperate to ask you lots of questions about it. But so as a bit of context then, what are they using music for? Is it religious? Is it entertainment? Mix of everything? What are they using music for?
It's everything. It's just like we would do today. To add something a bit extra, you put music with it, because music elevates everything, doesn't it? So they would use it from funerals to coronations to weddings to baptisms to feasts, banquets, masks, music in the privy chamber. And then that's just them listening to music. There's also music that they would be making themselves. Henry VIII composed his own music. Anne Boleyn was known to have a voice like a siren, which I love that one of the ambassadors, and I forget who it is, so I need to go back and check this, described Anne Boleyn as having a voice like a siren. And it harks back to the siren being the mermaid that lures the sailors to their deaths. So I don't know, is that one of those kind of, there's an insult in there, there's like
a backhanded compliment.
Yeah, is it somewhere, it might not be at all. I might be doing this ambassador a huge disservice here, but to me a siren was a very kind of clear, kind of otherworldly creature, and it's kind of that
ethereal voice.
Yeah, exactly that. And is that her luring him away from the Catholic Church? Who knows?
So let's talk about this book then. So you posted this, it was only last week, I think you posted about it.
I went, yeah.
So it's the Anne Boleyn music book. So yeah. Tell us about it. Where were you? What is it? And so was this her book then?
Yes. I think there are some people who could dispute it, because obviously this far in the future from when it was in anyone's possession, there will be people that dispute it. But it's a collection of French, mostly French music, some of which is in Latin as well. That I think they believe that it was, I think one theory is that it belonged to, who was it now? I can't remember who. And
passed down to her.
Or... Yeah, and passed down to her. It's given to her as a gift, and it was, and then given to her in 1529, because the inscription on it says "Mistress Anne Boleyn, now thus." So the fact that she's referring to herself as mistress. That she stopped doing that in about 1529, and it's certainly before her queenship, because she wouldn't have been writing something Mistress Anne Boleyn by then. But I think it's probably in her formative years in France that she was given that book, and then it made its way over to England, and then not much is known about it until the kind of late 1800s, when it was eventually acquired and then bought for the Royal College of Music, where it's been kept. And I don't think even then they realised its significance until really quite recently, when it was properly looked at.
So how did you know it was there?
I studied at the Royal Music. Oh, hold on. I don't know how that's happening, sorry.
You're back.
I'm on Do Not Disturb, so I don't know how that even managed to happen. I studied at the Royal College of Music. I did my master's there. I studied for my master's there. It's in the library there, so I sent them a little email, and it explained my interest in Anne Boleyn and the music, and asked if I could go and spend a little bit of time taking some kind of very, like, really, really looking at it in detail, because it is just incredible. I mean, to see her writing in there is just unreal, absolutely unreal.
Well, because we were both at Hever on the 19th, when they have the books of hours open and you see her inscriptions in there, and that's amazing. I don't know why I just didn't even think about what else, if anything else, was out there, because honestly, until you posted about it last week, I'd never heard of this book. And yet you've got her writing in there. And
Yeah.
then wasn't there as well, didn't you, you posted a picture of Anne's falcon.
Yeah.
And Catherine of Aragon, is it an eagle?
Anne's falcon, and you can see it pecking at Catherine of Aragon's pomegranate.
Oh, pomegranate, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, you know, the pomegranate was a fertility symbol as well, but I mean, it was famously Catherine of Aragon's emblem, wasn't it? So I think it would be doing the drawing a disservice if we just assume that it was, considering who the book belongs to. I think it's likely to be a very direct.
As I said, that wasn't going to pass Anne by, even if you want to believe that it was not supposed to be that. She's not going to have looked at that and gone, and did not register.
It's got to have been that. Amazing. I think it's been that. But what's interesting is that there are some beautiful illuminated letters there, and you see Anne's falcon again. You see mermaids. You see, you know, the usual things. You see roses. These illuminations stop about 40 or 50 pages into the manuscript. It's about 200 pages long, or slightly more than that. And it's just that whoever was scribing this at the time either ran out of time or was given something else that they had to work on. So it's not like this was like a highly prized, used everyday book like the books of hours. And I think that's probably why it got put aside and forgotten about as much. So, you know, eventually it just got put away. Someone obviously thought enough of it. So when they were kind of removing everything of Anne Boleyn's, because as we know, Henry VIII just tried to wipe her existence off the face of history. But I just love the fact that there are little things like this that survive. But the fact that these illuminations stop halfway through, then towards the end of the book, one of the French songs, so one of the secular, because it's a mix, this manuscript, of religious and non-religious music. One of the non-religious songs is one all about how promising to give love's desires, and it kind of ends with good things come to those who wait. That's got a little illumination on it that's not completely finished, but it is decidedly more detailed than anything else at that point in the book. So it makes
like it's a favourite.
Yeah, that's what I wonder. Yeah. And especially when you think about, at the time, good things come to those who wait. Le temps viendra.
Well, she waited a long time. I'm not sure it was that good when it got there, but no. So the book is like it's complete of music. Then it's just that the illuminations.
The illuminations aren't there? Yeah, there's 4 different scribes that have been attributed to actually writing this music out, and I think it was finished in stages. So it certainly wasn't done in one go. And in fact, it was Margaret d'Angoulême who I think the book. This is one of the theories that it could have been hers, or it could have been Louise of Savoy, who then gifted it to Anne Boleyn.
Right. Okay.
I knew the names would come back.
So it had already been in existence for quite a while then. Before.
So
what's it like? Robustness wise, is it feeling very delicate, or is it?
No, it doesn't. And I had a couple of comments on it saying you're not wearing gloves, but apparently,
well,
you don't need to wear,
isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would have just done as I was told, but they didn't ask me to wear gloves to hold it, but they did just say don't touch where the ink is and try and use the middle edge of the page rather than the corner of the page to turn it, just to reduce the risk of ripping anything. Yeah. But no, it's printed on paper rather than parchment, which is, I'm not sure why they did that, but you can see there's lots, and you can see where the ink has come through on the other side. So sometimes you're looking at pages thinking, is that a marking where they've tried to rub something out? Because there are definitely times where you can see that. You can see where whoever has scribed it has done something wrong. They've waited for the ink to dry and then they've scratched it off.
Yes.
And it's lovely just being able to kind of hold the paper at a bit of an angle, and you can see what they've done. You think, oh look, well they've just gone straight to that bar there and they should have done that. And it's lovely because you feel like you can just picture yourself back there. They're doing that by candlelight.
Yeah. Anyone who's written their own music, like I did, GCSE music, so you're constantly writing music, and
and we're doing it just with pencil and rubber on a piece of printed out. You can see where they've had to like extend the lines of their manuscript as well, where they're doing that, and it's lovely.
That brings you so close to the person who scribed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see the difference in the hand between the different scribes as well. So the way that they're actually drawing the notes, because just like handwriting when you're writing words, when you're writing musical notation, everyone has their own little quirks as well. So some people's, the tail on one of the scribes is a lot longer than the others. They feel, you can imagine them writing that they're a lot more jaggedy when they're writing it, with this other one who just seems to have quite this delicate flowing hand.
Right. I can imagine them have a flourish and some quite straightforward.
About their personalities and about were they musicians that were scribing it as well? They literally just copying something out. It's very, very interesting. But to have actually been sitting there holding something that belonged to Anne Boleyn, holding music that belonged to her, for me was just an absolutely mind-blowing moment. To think that I'm humming this music to myself there, singing from the same book that Anne Boleyn would have sung from. And that's an incredible privilege, and something I won't forget either. It was just absolutely amazing. Loved it. So
has anyone ever transcribed those tunes? So have you got access to them?
Yeah, there are some transcriptions of them. There's also there are a recording. There's an album recording made of it as well, I think produced by David Skinner, and it's really, really lovely. And I think they did workshops at the Royal College as well, where they experimented with different numbers of singers, different combinations of instruments, because a lot of these things are transcribed for voices, but you'd use what you've got at the time. So if you've got one voice but you happen to have someone who's really proficient on the lutes with you, they do the other parts, or someone playing the spinet or playing recorders. And it just seems like that's the kind of experimentation that they would have done at the time.
That's really interesting, because I suppose people do it now, don't they? You get cover versions of famous songs.
Yeah.
There's people singing or playing all the versions of songs all the time.
And that's it. This book was, I think that the librarian, they're just affectionately referred to it as Anne Boleyn's mixtape. And that is, you know how you said like earlier on, like now that's what I call music. That's it. And that's just her. She'd have had that to be like, oh, I know what I fancy hearing. Let's do this one.
I really like the fact that makes it a more informal book for her than, say, the books of hours.
Yeah, that's what I think. It's hugely personal. Because I think your taste, when you in modern day, someone's taste in music says a lot about them, doesn't it? And there's so many hidden meanings in it. You can see, I mean, there's beautiful religious music in there as well, but it really does show the things that she was literally listening to at the time, even though she wasn't performing them herself. Although she was a skilled musician, I think she played the lute as well. It's, in terms of creating some immersive history, we know that that's the music that was being heard at the time.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Are you going to be able to perform some of, or do you already perform some of the songs?
I do already. I think I've recorded at least, I know at least two of them I've got videos of already. And two of them appear in my Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn programme that I do the performance, because I just think they're gorgeous. They are absolutely stunning.
And what kind of tone are they setting? Are they very, in terms of like happy, sad, or what's the kind of?
It's a real. There's a real mix. There's I think you've got this kind of light-hearted, flirtatious element in the one that I was referring to before, and that's called Jouissance vous donnerai. And then there's Veine et Regrets, which is just this, it's all talking about regrets, and that's very sad, very soulful, very slow, and a very, very, very big contrast to the other one. And then you've got religious music, so just completely devotional to God music as well. So it really is, there's a little mix of everything in there.
And how many songs are in there then? Do we know?
42, I think. Let me do it. Yeah, 42 pieces in there.
That would be great to get hold
of.
It's
incredible. It really is. I'm hoping you can buy a copy of it, but it's rather expensive. But at some point I might be able to justify splashing out on it.
That's what I was going to ask, if you can actually, if there's anyone sort of published it.
Yeah, they have. You can get pretty good copies of I've got the Royal Choir book here, so you can get these incredibly detailed copies of
they're literally
Yeah, so it is literally original notation. But the one for the Anne Boleyn music book it's got incredible notes, like footnotes and introduction and kind of explanations all the way through it as well. And it would be an incredible resource.
It's well,
sounds like I've got
your Christmas list. Santa might bring it.
I hope so.
Yeah. So, I mean, as well as the sound, then obviously being incredibly important, but I know that for you, it's not just that; it's the look of the performance as well. And you were talking there about accompanying instruments. So, tell everyone, because I know as well, this was something you had in mind when you decided to start doing this. That the look and how you'd be accompanied. Tell people, because you don't do things by halves, I think, Jay, do you?
No, I didn't want to do anything by halves. I wanted it to be, well, when you think of the Tudors, you think extravagance and no expense spared, and I think that's how they would have been with their court musicians. Henry VIII was, I think, by the time of his death, had 60 musicians in his employment. And I think, especially when creating something immersive, it's quite important to be true to the instruments that would have been used at the time. So I'm using a lot of lute at the moment because it was portable. It was something that was hugely popular. Henry VIII played the lute, Anne Boleyn played the lute, Elizabeth I played the lute. It was, and they had lutenists employed in the Privy Chamber for entertaining the King and Queen. So that we use a lot of that. But then I'm looking to do some work with recorders as well at the moment, because I think that'd be an incredible sound.
Most people just remember recorders from primary school, though.
Yeah, recorders get a really bad rap. They do.
You're going to make recorders great again.
They're horrible. But when you get a beautiful early music instrument recorder, they're stunning. They're absolutely gorgeous. And I think that would work really well. Organ as well is another one that would have been used at the time, although not so much for the music that I'm performing. Like some of the chamber music, the French songs, would be much more suited to the lute. And I think in terms of performing in historic houses as well, that's what the lute was made to be performed in rooms like that. So it just makes complete sense to use it.
Yes, no backing tracks here.
No backing tracks here. No backing tracks. No microphones. We don't need microphones.
I don't think you need a microphone.
Yeah, I've been told I'm pretty loud when I talk. So.
No. It's perfect. You're clear. The sound travels.
Me and my husband just shout at each other the whole time. I think. It's only when I go and speak to other people that I realise how loud my actual speaking voice is as well.
When someone tells you a secret, you're like,
hey, I'm right here. You don't need to shout.
That's funny. Now, it's not just the instruments, though. Tell people about your dresses.
The costumes are a huge part of it. Because not just in terms of Tudor stuff, but in terms of any performance, before I've even opened my mouth to sing a note, I've walked onto a stage and people are taking in part of that performance. So the costuming was always going to be a really, really big part of this for me. And the ones that I wear are made by Gina Clark, and she is the Tudor Dreams historical costumier, and they're incredible. They consist of several different garments that come together to make the finished look. So we start off with a linen shift dress, and I've got a couple of them. My favourite one has got the black work, so the little kind of black stitching all the way around it to add a little bit of detail. And that's what they wore as an underwear, kind of underneath the formal part of the gowns, and it's that would be washed again and again, because obviously the really expensive fabrics, they didn't have washing machines like we have them. They'd have to be aired. So in terms of kind of sweat and things like that would be going into your body linen. And they would sometimes change their body linen several times a day if it was very hot. Now, these costumes take about half an hour to put on. So I think like I've got this image of Tudor ladies, Tudor queens, that would have just spent their entire lives getting dressed and undressed in the summer. So after this shift dress, you've got a petticoat. It's a U-fronted petticoat. So it starts pulling in at the waist. After that is a bum roll, so a big kind of sausage-shaped thing that sits on the hips. And the idea of that is, so when you're corseted into your dress and you get a nice kind of nipped in waist, the extra padding around your hips just accentuates the smallness of your waist. So that kind of feminine figure. Then after the bum roll, we've got a kirtle. So it's the kind of strapped, it's got straps, but it doesn't have sleeves dress. And that is corseted, that is boned, and it laces up at the sides. After that, we've got the overgown. Most of the ones that I've got are velvet, although I'm currently having one made, a new dress that isn't velvet. It's going to be a lighter material, and that's the one with the sleeves. And often, like, my one's got fur on them as well, and that is corseted as well, and that laces up at the front. And by that point, you are very much unable to breathe. Well, I say that, I mean, you can breathe, but your breathing is certainly restricted. So I do feel like that possibly makes, it will make an impact on how I sing music, because I take more breaths. But then that's what they'd have done.
Well, that's what I was about to say. I was about to ask, how does that affect your singing? But then, yeah, if that is how they had to do it, that's how they were dressed when they were singing, then that's quite an insight.
Absolutely. So then after that, all of that, we've then got a placard that pins onto the front. You also pinned at the shoulders, because that's how they'd have done it at the time. They'd have been pinned into their dresses. The full sleeves go on, and then the headdress, your gable hood, your French hood, your cap if you're going Elizabethan, and the look is complete.
I think I've seen you in, is it like a Catherine of Aragon? Have you got a Catherine of Aragon with the hood that comes right to the front?
I've got a gable hood. Yeah,
gable hood.
Yeah,
and then obviously your Anne Boleyn gown, which looks incredible. I saw the photo of you next to the Rose portrait.
Yeah, and I was in the Walker Gallery in Liverpool a couple of weeks ago, and I had a photo done next to the portrait that's currently on loan from the National Portrait Gallery, which is actually, I think, a closer resemblance to my gown than the Hever portrait, because it has the fur on the sleeves. But I mean, they're both very similar, but they're stunning portraits, and I absolutely adore that. The Anne Boleyn portrait gown is, I think it's possibly my favourite. Possibly.
It does. I mean, it's almost weird to see you in normal clothes.
You know, I love, the last time I went to Hever, as I was leaving the car park, there were some people there that I'd spoken to quite a lot, just as Anne Boleyn, who just, I said goodbye to them, and they looked at me like I was a crazy lady, because I think they hadn't, by that point, my hair was back to being blonde, I was wearing my normal clothes, and I had no idea who I was.
Yeah. We did it different, and especially the hoods. Yeah, they really make a difference, I think.
Well, when I'm playing Anne Boleyn as well, I spray my hair so that it's dark.
Yes, so very good, very authentic.
But I think she's quite an iconic brunette. So yeah, I tried a wig, didn't look right on me, didn't look right at all. Couldn't.
God, that would get hot as well, though.
It would. Although I've said that, I've sprayed my hair a few times, and then thought, if I get sweaty now, I'm going to end up like a brown streak down my forehead. It hasn't happened yet, but
we haven't had a warm summer yet, really.
No, we haven't. Luckily, last week when it was really, really super hot, I didn't have any working costume to do. So
who? Presumably, someone has to help you get dressed then.
Yeah. It's not. Actually, it isn't possible. I can't. One of them, my red dress, where it's a slightly bigger size, I can just about pin the shoulders myself. But yeah, I do need someone to help me dress.
Yeah. So other than getting into costume, what other preparation do you do for a performance?
I think probably the biggest thing is selecting the music for it. So I've just done some performances at Speak Hall in Liverpool. This beautiful National Trust property. So if you get a chance to, if you haven't been there already, it's well worth a visit. It is absolutely stunning. But the programme that we were doing there was an Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII programme. So it's just all about selecting music. And to me, that's just it's the ultimate programme. I love that, because there's so much to go from. Because Henry VIII himself composed music, and there's lots of music that's been attributed to him. So that's a little goldmine in itself. There's the Anne Boleyn Songbook, that we have music, flirtatious music. It was just it was a dream to do that program. And other music that we know was being played at the English court at that time, and slightly previous to that at the French court as well, so when Anne Boleyn would have been there. And it's just all about just trying to find things that reflect the message that we're trying to get across. And the message for that particular performance, it was kind of celebrating their relationship and their love that they had through the music. But then of course we did want to touch on the fact that it didn't work out so well. So I did do, there's I think I sung it for you actually at the on the 19th of May, the song "Oh Death Rock Me Asleep."
Yeah.
Which has been, some people say it was written by her. I think that's really unlikely. And I think most people believe that's really unlikely now. But it was certainly written about her, and it can be dated back to 1536. And it is perfect. It's beautiful for that. And I think having spent 40 minutes or so doing very happy, very jolly, quite flirtatious music, to then have that stark contrast of then he killed her. It kind of, and it reflects how quickly things could change for people at the time. And it wasn't just Anne Boleyn that happened to. It happened to like Cromwell. But it wasn't just the Queens, was it? There, you know, you had to have your wits about you at the Tudor court because it could change.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And just so unexpectedly. And Anne's downfall, if you like, was that fast. I mean, it was really fast.
It's staggeringly fast. It was, and quite, can you imagine how terrifying that must have been?
Well, no, and
we can't, can we? We can't.
You can't. And just the thinking about, she had a young child, and when you've got a young child, they are in your mind. Well, when you've got children, I mean, I can tell you, even when they get a little bit older, they are always on your mind.
They really are.
And your first thought is always, but what happens to them? And just the thought that,
that's it. And especially when you know that, or when Anne would have been aware of the fact that she was then declared a bastard, so her future was not in any way secure. It is a really, really harrowing thought.
Yeah, it is. So you can take, though, the plethora of music that appears to be around from Tudor periods and put together different, to use probably a modern term, set list in order to tell whatever story you're sort of doing at the time.
I mean, it can be something that, I mean, I had Henry VIII there as well. But
this is Phil, isn't it, from Harvington?
Does make a fantastic Henry VIII. He's really good. But so we could have some dialogue as well. But it was lovely. It was very light-hearted until the "Oh Death Rock Me Asleep" moment. But then we did want to end it with something happy. So we came back with "Pastime with Good Company" because people know it. It's a very, very famous, probably I think the most famous of all the Tudor tunes. One written by Henry VIII. And, you know, it's worth remembering that despite Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII's marriage being unsuccessful, the princess that was such a disappointment at the time did turn out to be Queen Elizabeth I and brought the golden era. So
and what was that song again? Sorry.
"Pastime with Good Company." You'd know it if you heard it, definitely.
Right, I'm going to look it up straight after this. I love that. You'll know it when you hear it.
Go to the Tudor Songbook on YouTube and you see me singing it.
Oh, excellent. Yes, absolutely, will do. So one of the things I was going to ask you then, because you've told us about how much music there is. Now, imagine you're not as musical as you are. Would someone who doesn't have that sort of level of appreciation or experience of music see a difference in styles, or does it all sound similar? Do you know what I mean?
I do. I know what you mean. And I think there are some differences in styles. I think because of the range of occasions that music was used for, you've got the stark contrast in there being music that would have been appropriate for a funeral being held at that, so a very, very solemn occasion, to music that would be used in a masque or to dance a really happy, energetic dance to. So in that sense, in terms of the speeds, the the mood that they're trying to set in the music is very different.
Yeah, I suppose I never thought of the speeds being different. Yeah, which is going to make a huge
dance
difference.
as well, but even so, when you get a kind of feeling with the dance music, the way the beat is carried, rather than this almost kind of ethereal kind of the music just kind of weaves together for the sacred music. I mean, that's generalizing massively. I'm aware
that's generally the kind that I think most people would have just heard as background. You know, you were saying like when you go to Hampton Court and there's music on, and it is that sort of music, I suppose, because it's not taking you out of the moment. It's just literally background music, and you're not going to hear where it ends and starts again, because it does flow into the next, or it can go on a round.
Yeah. But the type of music that they'd have listened to while they were, you know, drinking wine in the privy chamber somewhere is going to be very different to the type of music that they've listened to when they were at mass.
I just love the idea of someone, can you pop on some music? You know, like now, if you're like having dinner, just pop on some music.
Ask the recorder to play the lute for a bit.
Just like, yeah, lutist, and just get into.
I know, it's a funny thought, isn't it? Yeah.
So but do you have? Sorry, go on.
Well, the musicians were very, very highly prized in the Tudor court.
Like a good stereo now.
Oh yeah,
good sound system. Well, it's important. It just shows how important music. I mean, music has been important to human beings. Must be forever. You know, you've got drums and all sorts of things forever, haven't you?
People have been using voices to communicate since dawn of man.
And I suppose music travels further. Yeah. Maybe there's a purpose for music as well as just like an actual, to send a message.
Well, I think also there's just the very, very basic human need to express yourself. And that it's the most basic form of that is our voices. And you can tell when someone's upset because their voice will rise and fall, and you do get your voice will give away things about you that you probably don't want it to, but you can't help it. And that's where I think the singing just comes into its own, because if you can get it right, you can put those emotions and you can interpret them into a 500-year-old piece of music, because their emotions 500 years ago aren't different to ours now. They felt sadness just as we feel sadness. We just have a different set of circumstances around us.
Yeah. So do you have a favourite piece? Is that hard?
It's really hard because there's so many and they're different as well. But I think probably Jouissance de vous donner by Sermesy. And that's the one that I was saying. It's in French, which of course was the language that Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII wrote their love letters in, the language of love. And it's saying, love's pleasures will I give to you, and I will lead you to the target of your deep desire. And good things
don't hold back.
Oh no, exactly, that's it. When you think about how reserved in some cases they had to be, music was their way of saying something that you couldn't say, and I love that.
It's a bit like the dances in the kind of Georgian era, when you got like in Pride and Prejudice, where they only touch if they're at a dance, so it's all very charged, highly charged.
It's like, well, I'm going to sing you this song. It's like, well, it's only a song, I didn't actually say it, did I? But if they knew the meanings, then
so can we hear you sing that on your YouTube channel? Or
yes,
have you got that on?
I think I've got a couple of recordings of that on there actually, and that one does feature in the Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII performance as well.
Wonderful.
Where I ask him to read out the words in English before I sing it in French.
You ask it, so
I give him a little note saying, "These are the words of what I'm about to sing for you." So then the audience have got it; they know exactly what the song's about.
Sounds. Yeah. I'm just imagining Phil delivering that song to a room. Oh, honey. So when is your next event?
My next event actually is at Harvington Hall.
And that's lovely. That's
23rd of July. So that one is going to be, there's going to be two sets in there. We're going to have the Anne Boleyn and the Henry VIII programme, and then we're going to have an interval where everyone has some dinner, and then it's going to be Elizabethan after that. So there'll be some Dowland lute songs, and there will be a kind of looking at the difference between Tallis's music in the reign of Henry VIII and Elizabeth I, because it little subtle changes. It's beautiful. So come along next day with
changing the era.
Well, I think that especially Harvington Hall's an Elizabethan property as well, so it makes sense to do something Elizabethan there. And there's so much amazing music, and it'll make a nice contrast to the Henry King Tudor music. But then the day after that, we are going to Turton Tower, which is up near Bolton.
Right. And
then on the 22nd of August, we are in Bolton Castle, which is in North Yorkshire. Fantastic. Doing a similar programme, but it's they're really, really beautiful pieces of music in there. I'm so excited to be performing them.
It's so lovely that you're getting to travel to all these places to do this.
Yeah. Oh, it's a privilege. It really is a privilege to do it, because I'm seeing some incredible places and I'm learning so much about them while I'm there as well. Because you know what, you go to these places and you've got an idea, you read up about it first. But when you're actually walking around, and especially with what I'm doing, I'm quite often in little bits that the public don't always get to go into. It really, really is an honour and a privilege to see places in that way.
It's fantastic. And I'm sure you you definitely will add to the experience of anyone who's visiting those places at that time.
I do hope so. It is lovely. I really enjoy speaking to people while I'm out and about doing this, because especially children have brilliant questions.
Children are fab for getting straight to the point.
Straight to the point. That's it. We spoke to a lovely group of children at the Walker Gallery in Liverpool who had some brilliant questions, especially for Phil as Henry VIII. Although because I was Anne Boleyn that day, a couple of them looked at me and they went, "He's going to cut your head off."
Oh,
how dare you!
Gosh, it's a bit disturbing how casually we actually teach the children about a man who had his wife's head cut off.
I think it's quite terrifying, really. I remember having to kind of broach that subject with my own children, who find it absolutely fascinating and hilarious at times. But they seem unfazed by it. I mean, thankfully, because they don't actually experience any kind of horrific violence like that. So it's very much a concept to them.
Well, indeed, and it is 500 years ago, so we can.
It's not something that they're thinking about happening now.
No, that would make it quite.
They know their heads are safe.
Yes. So we're going to in the main part of the interview now, I'm going to be asking Jay some questions that my patrons have put to her. So, but Jay, before we go on to that, where can people find you online? And we've spoken about a couple of events you've got coming up, but where can they find out about other events that you've got coming up and see your stuff?
I advertise all my events on my social media pages, which are all called the Tudor Songbook. So you can find me on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter and YouTube as well. And I've just started TikTok as well. There's not much on there yet, but I'm just finding my feet. It's all very new, TikTok. And the website is www.thetudorsongbook.co.uk.
Wonderful. Thank you.